Gathering of Brothers Publishing presents The Williams Curse, Part 1. Read by Fighter9. A clean-shaven, tall, dark-skinned man was pacing back and forth in his bedroom, clearly working himself up.
I tell you, Deborah, I can't live around here anymore.
His voice was deep and gravelly, yet firm. He let out an exasperated sigh before sitting down next to his wife on the bed.
Dijon, hush. You're going to wake up the kids. What's wrong, sweetie?
Dijon exhaled to calm down and tensed his muscles to relax them before speaking again.
Sorry, baby, but I thought when I started this business here, folks would be lining up to call my company for jobs nonstop. Guess folks don't need a small-time construction company in New York. It went well at first, but I don't think we can hack it here.
Dijon muttered in a quieter, yet just as upset tone.
And another thing, I'm out there with the boys scrambling to get work, making calls, and I'm coming home late. I'm missing out on spending time with you and the twins.
Deborah shushed him and kissed him on the cheek.
Honey, listen to me. When you said that you wanted to start a business in construction, despite us being broke, do you remember what I told you?
Dijon looked at his wife. Her long black hair and ebony skin shone so beautifully even in the light of a simple lamp. But what caught his attention were her eyes. Those deep brown eyes looked at him with understanding and not a hint of concern.
You told me that you believed in me.
That I believed in you, she repeated back to him. You damn straight. I did 2 years ago and still do today. You tell me what you want to do, and we'll do it. Hell, we got enough saved up, that's for sure, so I wouldn't call yourself a failure for that. What do you think, bae?
Dijon clapped his hands together and with newfound confidence stood up to get his phone.
Well, one of the young bucks we hired a month or two ago, John, I think, mentioned to me about his hometown a little while ago, DeSoto, Texas.
He pulled up some images of the city for his wife to see and showed her the upscale houses, markets, and several of the idyllic parks. Deborah's eyes lit up while viewing the pictures in front of her.
Now that looks like a place to live and raise a family. I mean, the apartment here is nice, but I want the kids to not grow up seeing just dull, gray buildings everywhere they go,
Deborah said with joy in her voice. Dijon held up a finger with a smirk on his face.
And it has the second largest black community in Texas. We would finally be able to raise the kids around folks they know can relate to easily, just like we did when we were growing up,
he said excitedly. Dijon just wanted to be more involved with his community for him and his family.
Oh, Dijon, you've been mulling over this for a while now, haven't you?
Deborah said, stifling her laughter.
I'm guilty as charged, baby, and I've looked into it. There's a prime market for construction work, plumbing, roofing, the works. I intend to fill that market, so I think I'd just sell the business I've got here and we can get moving. How does that sound?
He asked her.
I already told you I got your bag. And does this mean what I think it means?
She said with hope in her eyes. Dijon put a hand on her slender hip and pulled her close to him.
It does. We're going to build our home just like we always talked about. We're going to start over fresh and new.
Deborah hugged Dijon, and the two talked excitedly the rest of the night about their plans and what they would need to prepare. The next morning at breakfast, the smell of sausage, bacon, and eggs filled the air. It was a Saturday, and most of the Williams family were in good spirits. The daughter, Imani, was thoroughly pleased with the idea of moving to Texas. After all, it was the home state of her favorite gymnast, Simone Biles. To Imani, this was the best news she had ever received in her 10 years of life on this planet, according to her. Her twin brother Marcus, however, did not share the same positive sentiment of his sister. Even though he did not outright speak about his displeasure with having to move, his body language couldn't hide his dissatisfaction. He furrowed his eyebrows and crossed his arms in disapproval across his thin chest.
Hey, little man, what are you so upset about?
Dijon asked as he brought a plate of food over for his son. Marcus still said nothing and just looked down at his food.
Oh, come on, Mushroom, don't do Daddy like that. I'm sure you'll love it down in Texas.
Dijon patted his son's afro and quickly moved his hands to tickle him, causing Marcus to laugh and smile.
There you go. That's my little man. Now, eat up. Gotta get big and strong like Daddy.
Deborah looked on at her husband and son. She smiled at the little display that just occurred before cleaning up the kitchen. Imani tapped her father on the arm and asked how long it would take before they would move. Dijon wiped his mouth with a napkin and mused to himself for a moment.
Good question. I'd like it to be as soon as possible. I know a few guys who might be interested in buying my equipment, so give it about 2 weeks. All right, sweetie.
Imani agreed and hugged him before settling down to eat her food. Once everyone was at the table, they talked about how they would enjoy their weekend together. Deborah suggested going out to a movie, and everyone agreed. Dijon then finished his food, kissed his wife, and excused himself from the table.
All right, everyone. I've got some calls to make. Hopefully this time in a few weeks, we'll be down in sunny DeSoto, Texas.
The sweat dripped down Dijon's forehead as he and some of his new crew were pulling up some wooden beams for the new house he and his family would call home.
Easy. Easy. All right. And got it,
Dijon exclaimed proudly. Work was going well so far. Dijon was able to sell his old business and equipment to a larger construction company, and thankfully, his old employees found employment with them. For the current moment in time, his family lives in an apartment complex, but he didn't care. He was just happy he was fortunate enough to quickly be able to start a new construction company and purchase the land to build the dream home that he and Deborah always wanted. Dijon's thoughts were interrupted by one of his employees, Daryl. A kind yet hulk of a man called him over. Dijon noticed that Daryl was standing next to a stone-faced Native American man in a dark blue shirt. Dijon made his way over and told Daryl to tell the rest of the crew to take 15 and he'd be back in a bit. "Quite the house you are building, sir," said the man as he gestured over to the expanse of land and building materials. His voice was soft, yet all business. Dijon nodded and thanked him for what he believed to be a compliment. Up closer, he could tell how aged the man was due to his weathered face.
Anything I can do for you, Mr.
Bata. You may call me Mr. Bata.
Right. Well, you can just call me Mr. Williams. So, what can I do for you today, Mr. Bata?
Dijon said with slightly narrowed eyes. I am glad you asked, Mr. Williams. I am from the Caddo Indian Association of Eastern Texas, and I come bearing news that you need to hear, my friend. Mr. Bata folded one hand over the other and politely told Dijon that he needed to stop the construction of his house immediately. Dijon immediately became confused and irritated and put his hands on his hips.
Excuse me, Mr. Bata, but I paid for this land. I moved across the country, the goddamn country, to start my life over here. And now you want me to stop? What's this about, man?
Mr. Bata put a hand up and apologized for not explaining himself first. I am only trying to help you, Mr. Williams.
Uh-huh. And how are you doing that, sir?
Dijon's face started to twitch, and he tried to not raise his voice. Mr. Williams, I'm not saying you cannot have a home, just that you may wish to reconsider changing its location. I'm sorry no one has brought this to your attention before you began construction. There's plenty of better locations to build a home that I'm sure will meet your needs, Mr. Bata said while slowly bowing his head to show his sincerity. This did little to stifle Dijon's building anger.
Hell no! I've already got the foundation and we're putting up the frame now. It's too late, Mr. Bata.
But, Mr. Williams, you don't understand. This... Mr. Bata tried to explain, but Dijon shouted over the man.
Unless you have a court order or some kind of paperwork saying what I'm doing is illegal, I suggest you get off my property. I already spent the money, Mr. Bata. Now I recommend that you please leave.
Mr. Bata closed his eyes and nodded and apologized for upsetting him so much. But he said to call him any time if he ever changes his mind and handed him a card with his name, number, and email. He then said goodbye and drove off.
That man must be off his rocker if he thinks I'm giving this up now,
Dijon said out loud to himself. He was finally going to be part of a community he truly belonged to. A local Baptist church was a short drive away, and he was positive his company would hit it big here. And no one was going to turn him away from that. He shook his head and walked back over to his crew.
"Hey, Mr. Williams, what was that all about?"
an employee asked him.
Nothing, man. Dude was crazy, trying to tell me I shouldn't build my house here. Imagine having to call my wife and tell her, "Sorry, we can't do it. Gotta move back to New York." Yeah, right.
Dijon said with an exaggerated inflection on his words, and he laughed alongside his crew at the ridiculousness of it all. They then continued to work on the construction of the house after a quick break.
"Daddy's home!"
Imani yelled as she and Marcus ran up and practically catapulted themselves at their father.
Easy, kids. Daddy had a long day. Where's Mommy?
He bent down to kiss the foreheads of both of them and took off his boots as he brushed some mud off his jeans. Marcus, on the other hand, was looking behind his father and shrank back slightly. Dijon noticed this and ruffled Marcus's hair.
Everything okay, Mushroom?
Marcus looked behind his father once more before hugging him and nodding.
"Mommy is in your room,"
Imani shouted, interrupting the scene. Dijon thanked her and told them to get cleaned up before bedtime. He then made his way to his bedroom and entered it to see his wife laying on the bed, reading a book. She looked up and quietly asked him how his day was.
Fine, bae. Just fine. Made a lot of progress on the house today. You should come out sometime. It's looking beautiful. Let's bring the kids this weekend. We can have a picnic and everything.
Dijon started to undress and grabbed a towel from the closet for his shower later.
"Oh, for sure. I suppose we can do that,"
she said blankly, eyes never leaving the page of her book.
Damn it, Deborah. We haven't spent any time together since we got here. You should be happy that we even get the chance to,
Dijon growled at her. When she didn't respond after a few moments, he started to become more concerned.
Bae? What's going on?
Deborah put her book down and rubbed her eyes.
"I'm sorry, sweetie. It's just this job. I was excited they hired me as the head registered nurse, but driving to Dallas every day is tiring. And then I have to drive back and pick up the kids from the sitter's house. It's killing me. Pretty sure the doctors don't think I know what I'm doing either. Apparently they think someone of my appearance isn't fit. I'm not saying that's what it is, but it's been rough these past few weeks."
She began to tear up, and Dijon rushed to her side and held her in his arms and said sorry for getting upset. He had no idea what she was going through.
Shh. It'll be all right, babe. Don't you worry. Things will be rough at the start, but we always get past these things, right? Do you still believe in me?
"Of course I do,"
she replied instantly.
Great. Now, I'm gonna go get clean, eat some of that dinner I smelled, and then we can talk about what to do about all that. Sound good?
She smiled and wiped her eyes and told him it did.
All right. See you in a bit, babe.
Several months later, Dijon had succeeded in constructing the dream home that he and his wife had always wanted. A beautiful emerald green lawn with a red brick walkway that led up to their door was a spectacular sight for all who saw it. It was only a 2-story, 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that was constructed of red brick and pasty white limestone. All in all, it cost the family nearly $500,000, but that did not matter. Dijon's construction business was booming. 15 skilled employees, numerous job requests, and thanks to that, he had already made up the money spent on the building of his family's home. Fortune was now supposedly on the side of the Williams family.
"Hey, Dad, did you see my doll anywhere?"
Imani asked Dijon, who was reading the Saturday morning newspaper at the dining table.
Where did you last have it, sweetie?
He asked, partially paying attention to her as he read and sipped his coffee.
"I sat it right over there."
She pointed over to the dark blue couch in the living room. Dijon looked up and saw the couch was empty, but noticed from his position that something was under the couch. He could have sworn that a face was looking back at him. The face had stern and wide, dark, piercing eyes. Dijon did a double take, and when his eyes looked at the couch, The doll his daughter had lost was now there. He breathed a sigh of relief and told Imani where her doll was. She jumped for joy and thanked him before skipping over to pick it up. Deborah came up behind Dijon and asked him if he had any plans for the family today.
Nah, I figured we'd just stay in, maybe order some pizza and watch some movies. I've got some project details to work out, so staying home with you all would be best, I think. Tomorrow we can check out the church now that we have the time.
Deborah agreed, but she became quiet and began to fidget. Dijon, have you seen anything odd since we moved in?
What do you mean?
Did you see something?
I swear to God, if somebody has tried to break in.
Deborah shushed him and told him no, it wasn't anything like that. The other night when I came home from the gym, I set my keys down on the table, and when I turned around, they were gone. I looked around and couldn't find them. Know where they ended up. In Marcus's room. Dijon took this information in and pondered his wife's words.
And you're sure no one else was in the house?
I know what I saw, Dijon, and you didn't answer my question. Did you see anything? She asked him. He could sense her unease now, and not wanting to upset her further, he dismissed the thought of telling her anything. As it happened, Dijon did see some odd and bizarre occurrences, and not just the possible face under the couch. So Dijon did what he believed to be right. He lied.
No, bae. No, I didn't see anything. I'm sure you're just stressed out about work, the same as me.
He smiled at her and rubbed her arm in an attempt to console her. That brief moment of solace was shattered when they heard Marcus's screams from his closed room. Dijon immediately jumped up and ran to his son's room, but it was locked.
Marcus, open the door. What's wrong, son?
Dijon gripped the handle and shoulder shoved the door, but it was as though it was made of solid steel. Sweetie, it's Mommy. I need you to open the door. What's wrong, baby? Deborah pleaded, but only the increasingly panicked screams of Marcus could be heard. Imani watched from the hallway, seeing her parents trying to open her brother's door. She wanted to approach, but the closer she got to his room, the more apprehensive she felt. The air looked dark and discouraged her thoughts of getting closer.
That's it. I'm getting my tools. Marcus, Daddy will be back.
But before Dijon could go retrieve his tools, the screaming stopped immediately, and a click could be heard, indicating the door was now unlocked. Imani felt a surge of relief, and the depressing feeling dissipated. She rushed over to her parents now to join them. Dijon slowly and carefully opened the door, and what the family saw was Marcus sitting on the corner of his bed, sobbing quietly with his knees tucked to his chest. Deborah rushed into the room and hugged him tightly, shushing him and letting him know that he was safe now. Dijon looked around the room and couldn't see anything wrong. Marcus's toys were strewn about on the floor, but that was normal. Still, he felt uneasy about this. Sweetie, can you tell Mommy what happened? She softly asked Marcus. He looked up at his mother and said only one word. Kado. To alleviate the tension and stress of the previous day, Deborah and Dijon agreed going to church service would benefit the family greatly. Not only that, but it would allow them to mingle with the rest of the community in a peaceful setting. So, the Williams family found themselves dressed in their Sunday best, seated in the front row of an enormous cathedral-like Baptist church. And the person in charge of this large and pompous-looking church was an old yet bombastic man. He sauntered out in front of the congregation in an expensive black suit and leather shoes. His bald head shined brilliantly under the lights, and he held out his arms wide as if to signify his greatness to the crowd in front of him. It was obvious, due to his weight, that being a preacher sure can fill a man's gullet if he knows how to play his cards right. Brothers and sisters, I welcome you here on God's day, this fine Sunday morning. I don't know about y'all, but I'm feeling the grace of God flowing through my body and blanketing this very church with his gallant and nurturing presence. Can I get an amen? The crowd roared an enthusiastic amen in response and cheered for the Reverend. All right, let's settle down now. He paused to gaze out into the crowd. Oh, goodness me. I can see some new folks have come to hear the words of God and bask in his holy house. Well, allow me to introduce myself. He walked over to a mic and picked it up as the choir started to sing. The Reverend danced his way to the front of the wooden podium, and the Williams just watched on in utter confusion. While they enjoyed what they were seeing, they had never seen such a reverend like this in their lives.
My name is Reverend Jacob Benjamin, and you know I'm all about those Benjamins, folks. I'm just playing that money is for the Lord. Yes, it is. Hallelujah.
The crowd responded with a hallelujah of their own. Some even began to stand up and dance. Deborah and Dijon couldn't help but join in, as the jubilant singing and dancing was too infectious to resist, especially with it being encouraged by the Reverend himself. Imani and Marcus, on the other hand, were anything but joyous. Marcus whispered into the ear of his sister and nodded his head slightly in the direction in front of them. Imani herself nodded in acknowledgement, not to seeing anything, but rather an eerie sensation. Marcus, however, could see it. A shirtless young boy was staring directly at them, just a few feet away from their pew. He had crusted black paint across his eyes and chest in perpendicular bands and was wearing dusty brown leather pants. Marcus watched on in terror as the boy's head slowly and with numerous cracks began to rotate around until his jaw and forehead had switched places. He reached for his sister's hand and looked down to avoid the sight. He could hear the boy taunting him and saying horrendous things about him and his family. Unspeakable acts of violence were threatened upon his parents in particular, but feeling her brother's anxiety building, Imani gripped his hand and told him not to worry and that she was there. This gave Marcus a boost in confidence, and he raised his head to match the eyes of the boy's now disfigured and distended head, who was now hissing and attempting to lunge at him.
"Leave me alone,"
he mumbled. And to his surprise, the horrid entity dissipated into black specks, returning to the ether, where it belonged. Gathering of Brothers Publishing hopes you enjoyed this.